You are listening to Moccasin Tracks. My name is Deb Rigger, and I co-host with Rick and Carolyn Hunt. Moccasin Tracks is being broadcast from the traditional ancestral homeland of the Western Abenaki people, who have lived in this area for more than 12,000 years. It is known as Indagina in the language of the Abenaki, which means the land of the people of the dawn. We also call it New Hampshire today. We acknowledge and honor the people who still have a spiritual and cultural connection to this land. I want to thank you for tuning in. Rick, while we're behind the mic, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Noodin?
I would be pleased to. James B. Beard, also known as Noodin, is a cultural storyteller, educator, speaker, and author. His first book, White Mocs on the Red Road, Walking Spirit in a Native Way, is uniquely presented to aid people in gaining insight to the mysteries of the elder teachings of the traditional Native American. Articles he writes are about experiences that have occurred as he walks this path called life. These experiences are enhanced by the influence of Native American traditional teachings. As a storyteller, he offers insights to cultural values and personal ethics to aid people in finding ways to improve their lives. The intent of his work is to encourage awareness of cultural enrichment and protection of the environment. His white heritage is enhanced by ancient teachings we all once had. He walks a red road in order to better understand the original teachings of all people. Mission statement: to make available to all people an understanding of Native American culture in order to provide strong personal and community values. Interpretive educational programs. Striving to enhance the quality of values to live by for individuals, family, community, country, and world cultural enrichment. He has a website, http at northeastcultural.com.
Welcome, Noodin, to Moccasin Tracks. Hello.
Welcome.
Hey, good to hear your voice.
All right, nice to hear your voice as well. And, we told our listeners early in the show a little bit about you and your book that you wrote, White Mocs on the Red Road, Walking Spirit in a Native Way. And there's so much to be said, but I would just be honored to have you maybe introduce yourself to our listeners a little bit and tell us a little bit about your elders that taught you some of the lessons and the wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners today.
Thank you, Deb. My name is Jim Beard. I live in New Hampshire. I've been walking this walk for about, 30, 35 years. The proper introduction is in the language, so I'll give you a little bit of the language. Noodin indigenous mang endodem, Anishinaabe Ojibwe, Bamagana, Agichida, Andao, Celtic Endao. And what that said is that I am known as Wind in the spirit world. I'm of the Loon clan. I am an Ojibwe by adoption, very important, by adoption. I'm looked upon as a Ogichida, and Ogichida means a protector. We're all protectors, but initially it was because I was a veteran. And Celtic is my heritage. That's where I come from, is the European people, and so I always honor that part of who I am. A little bit about me, I guess, is how I came to this walk, and it was a search. I found that as I got to about mid-age, I began to wonder if everything that was going on around me and life as it was in our world was all that there really was. And I was searching for a connection to spirit that I had been given but did not understand. So I was looking for a different way to understand spirit. And in my search, I came upon native teachings. And I started to look into the native teachings to see what I could learn from there. But most of what is written down is not about their direct connection to spirit. It alludes to it. And I wanted to know how to connect. So along my path, a man came, and his name was Larry Matris. Larry is my first elder. He's an Ojibwe man from Minnesota. Grew up on the St. Croix River. Was born in a shack along the river, off the reservation, and was hidden from the authorities so that he wouldn't be taken away. Mm-hmm. He was given his teachings by his grandfather, and he is of a medicine society, and that his family has been a member of for generations. He agreed to teach me when he saw that I was willing to learn some of the language. And he told me at the time he started with me that I had to learn to speak the Ojibwe language if he was going to teach me, because what he had to share doesn't translate into English easily. And to understand the whole of what I was to learn, I would have to be able to understand how the language works. So that began a walk 28 years ago, I guess. Larry walked over in 2009, but he had adopted me into his family, and I have a brother in that family, Brian Matris, who is also a medicine man and a member of the Medicine Society. Was also taught by his grandfather, and he has lived with me and traveled with me for years and shared a lot of what he has come to know. So that's where my teachings began. Today, I wouldn't say that Larry is my only teacher. Brian is also my teacher. But I do attend ceremonies on a regular basis, and I have many, many elders that I couldn't name them all, share with me and help me to learn more about how to live a good life. Sharing the teaching that Larry gave, and talking a little bit about the 7 gifts of the 7 grandfathers would be important before we talk about the prophecies.
Okay, sure. We might have to have you back because there's a lot to talk about. Do you want to start with what Larry gifted you with?
Sure. I carry a lot of stories that Larry and other elders have gifted to me. They're not the stories that you'll find written down on my blog or written in my book. They're creation stories. They're guides. They're passed down from person to person. They're not given out on the air. They're not written down. I say that, but a lot of them have been gathered by different people and written down. It's not my place to do that, and he told me not to do that. So the stories that I do write down, they're experiences I've had because of the teachings that I've been given. And early on, Larry was trying to help me to understand how to learn from the four cardinal directions, what we in this world today relate to as the medicine wheel. It's not considered a medicine wheel, but that's what we call it. In the medicine wheel, there are a lot of teachings. What Larry was concerned with is that I have a temper. And he said, you have to learn how to control that temper. And he pointed out a particular four-directional teaching that could help me. And I had basically learned that a long time ago and just took it for granted. You start to live something and then you start to, it's automatic in your life, you know? But a young gal sent me an email from India. And she said that her life was upset. She didn't feel like her friends were her real friends, and she felt alone, and she was angry, she was hurt. And she couldn't find any solace, and she asked me, can you give me anything that would help me? And I thought about it, and I wrote this little piece that is in the article in the blog. Mm-hmm. And I had to describe it because I didn't have her in front of me to talk about it. So I told her to draw a circle, and that at the top, she should mark it with an N for north. And at either side, she should mark an E for east and a W for west, and at the bottom, an S for south. That in the middle of the circle, she should put a dot. And next to east, she should write down the feeling emotion. And next to the south, she should write down physical. And next to the west, she should write down spirit. And next to the north, she should write down mental. And then I described to her that those are the four parts of who we are. We're emotional, we're physical, we're spiritual, and we're mental. And that the dot in the center of the circle represents her. It represents her and only her. And that everything inside that circle is only her. It's nothing else. But everything outside that circle, that's everything that's around us. That's the trees, that's the sun, that's the air, that's the husband or the wife, that's the pet, that's the animals, that's everything that's outside. That's money, that's politics, everything that's outside of who she is. And that space that she is in, as long as she's in the center, she's centered between spirit and emotional to the east and west, and mental and physical to the north and south. Now, the problem is keeping yourself centered. And to stay centered, you have to remain in the middle of the circle. But all the time, things are coming in from outside and trying to penetrate that circle and have an effect on your being centered. I used a description of a flower, and I say, you walk into a room, you see a beautiful flower on the table, and it's all fresh, and it's just beautiful. And your first reaction is emotional. It's, oh, what a beautiful flower. Your next reaction is mental. You start to think, what how did that beautiful flower come to be? And then physically you start to feel and energized because you feel good about that flower. And spiritually you become grateful to the Creator for the flower that is in front of you. And so then you leave the room, and a day or two later you come back in and you look on the table and that flower started to wilt. Emotionally you say, oh wow, the flower isn't going to last. Mentally you start to think, how could I save that flower? Maybe if I put a little more water in, something to save that flower. And you start thinking about it. Physically, you don't feel energized because you're not seeing beauty in that flower. You're worried about what's going to happen to it. And spiritually, you're thinking, how could Spirit let that happen? Now you're no longer in the center of your circle. You have moved north and east. You are up between physical or mental and emotional. Now your job is to get yourself back to the center. The way to do that is to focus on the physical and the spiritual. Physically, go take a walk in a garden where you feel relaxed, but you're getting some exercise, you're doing something. And spiritually, thank the Creator for all that's around you, for your health, for everything that's there. And what that does is it pulls you back to a center. Everything in the four cardinal directions works to help us to stay centered and help us to understand how to proceed with different things. So I like to use that as an example. The four directional teachings aren't just words. It's not just a drawing. It's not just a pretty picture. Everything in it is about teachings. What Larry was he was my guide. He taught me how to read the medicine wheel. And the medicine wheel itself became my teacher. The more I applied the teachings of the medicine wheel to my life, the more balanced I'd be able to become. Mm-hmm. Now, that isn't to say I'm centered all the time. I'm certainly not. I go every direction you can imagine. But
we all probably do, yeah.
I have that little toolbox to use to help me to remember how to pull myself back in to a place of being centered. If I'm not centered, I can't help other people. If I'm not centered, I'm not at one with my Creator. And I want to be at one with my Creator at all times. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. Rick, do you have a question or comment? I want to introduce you to Rick Hunt, who is co-hosting Moccasin Tracks these days. And
Quite. Welcome. It's an honor to have you on here today. You have gathered your teachings and your experiences, it sounds like, throughout your whole life, at least the past 40 years, I think you said. Now, you also, you're an author, and you do cultural storytelling. I find all of that pretty fascinating. Are you a visual artist or a musician?
I'm not an indigenous artist, certainly. I'm not native. So I can't consider myself indigenous. My work is done because my teacher wanted it to be done. That's why he taught me, was to pass these things on. When we get later in the program up to the prophecies, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. But he came out here to the East to teach all people out here. And he had a following out here of about 150 people that came to circle for him every week during the years that he would come out. I only met him at the end of that period that he was doing that. He had remarried and he wasn't coming out as much because his wife didn't like to leave the res. My writing was inspired by Larry. It was inspired by these experiences. I felt I had something I could share, something that could help others to find a way to have a good life, but also to share what he came here for. In the prophecies, it said that all of the people that migrated to the West, which are the Ojibwe people, the Algonquin-speaking languages that are out in the West, that they would return one day and bring the teachings back to the people of the East. That's what he was doing. He was in hopes that he would start circles here of people, native and non-native, all over the place. That's what his desire was. It didn't hold. And it didn't hold because the group split up once he didn't come out and so forth. But there was one small circle of about 7 of us that stayed together. There were 6 of them, and then I joined. And that's how he got to know me. When he stopped coming out later, some of those people passed on. Others chose to walk different paths, not necessarily putting down what they had learned, but utilizing it for different things in their lives. I felt that he wanted people to continue to have circle, to continue to learn out here. I believe that's why he gave me my teachings. And those teachings aren't mine, they're his, and they're to be shared with everybody that wants to know these things. So that's why I have circles, and that's why I storytell. So if I go into a school, yeah, I'll tell a creation story. If I am amongst a group of people, I'll share my stories and the stories of creation. When I'm talking to you, I can share experiences I've had as a result of those teachings. And that's what I write down on my blog. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. It's so fascinating, but I have a lot of respect for this choice that you made because you've given up a lot to follow this way of life, and your commitment to it is very generous to everyone that comes in contact with, your work. So I thank you for that, and I have a lot of respect for what you're doing.
I used to feel like I gave up a lot, and I would have to agree. It would seem that way. The beauty of spirit and the beauty of prayer to the creation is that everything that comes back is always a reward. But a lot of the time, we don't recognize the answers that are given to us. When I started this walk, I lost my wife. She divorced me because she thought what I was doing was silly, and it was not conducive of somebody that owned an insurance agency in a small town. And I saw that as I was losing everything that I ever had that I cared about: my business, my wife, my children, my home, my cars, my great wealth, of course. And you'd have to look in the book, but what it finally comes out to be is I had asked Spirit to help me to know how it was to walk in a native walk. And I put my prayers into the fire with my tobacco, asking for that. And it was at that time that everything that I owned started to fall apart. And I thought, well, that wasn't how I saw this answer to a prayer. That all of a sudden I'd make a prayer to be gifted something and everything would be taken away. But after it had been taken away, I was freed up to be able to walk with my teacher, to walk with his son, to learn all of these things, to actually be doing it and living it. I learned how to live minimally. I never had any understanding of what it was like not to have food on my plate, not to have a cover for shelter at night. Today, I know what that's like. I try to live as minimally as I can, even today. Over a period of 20 years, I basically took a walk. And after 20 years, my now ex-wife said, "Would you please come home? You're not the same man that walked away." So I live in the house that I bought in 1988 with my best friend, the one person that I love more than anyone in my whole life. We're not married. I'll never marry her again, for God's sake. She'd not have me, I don't think. But the fact is, we get along and we take care of each other and we help each other every day. I learned from the teachings and from the stories that every one of those stories has an unnumbered amount of teachings built into them. I learned that all of the teachings were about taking care of yourself, taking care of community, honoring all that is around you, and most importantly, whatever you receive, give it out, give it back to the people. And the people are the most important. But the people doesn't just mean you and me and other two-leggeds. The people also means all of the trees and all of the land and all of the ground and all of the stones and all of the animals. Everything is the people. Everything carries spirit. That makes me feel fulfilled because I know that I am gifting back what was given to me. And the more I give it out, the more it comes back. Sometimes to the point I can hardly contain myself because it's, wow, how could this happen? How could people be so nice? How could people be so caring? And I watch that happen in my circles with the people that come in. I see people come in that are lost or hurt or recovering from drugs and alcohol, are suicidal, veterans. And they come to the circle and they walk away and they say, I feel better. I don't know why, but I feel better. And then some of them, not all of them, keep coming back. And after a while, I start to see a fulfillment of what Larry had asked me to do, and that is to carry the message. So that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Just to give you a time frame, Zoom is telling me we have like about 10 minutes left. So what you feel is important to share with our listeners today, but I do want you to know that you are welcome back here to Moccasin Tracks to continue to share your stories. I would welcome that.
Okay. What would you like to cover within the time frame we have left?
Well, you talked about that medicine wheel, and I will share that blog spot if that's okay to share on social media, so people can have that story written out for them and they can read that again. I don't know if we have time to talk about some of the prophecies. We could start and maybe continue that at another time as well.
No, I have time because I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
There are three things I consider to be important in having balance and happiness in the life I live. My own personal experience, I'm not telling anybody else, I can make you happy. You have to find that for yourself. Mm-hmm. You'll find it in your heart. You mm-hmm. learn to love who you are. But the four directions, together with what the Ojibwe call in a story, they call it the seven grandfathers, and it's about what is called the seven gifts. The seven gifts are wisdom, respect, humility, honesty, love, bravery, and truth. And you may have seen them from time to time or heard others speak of them. They're not just words. Each one encompasses a whole volume of information. If you can learn to apply those seven gifts all together as one, not just love, not just honesty, not just truth, but all together, what happens is you start to walk that way and people will see it. And then they want to know how you're walking that way and being so happy. Those gifts were given to the first elder. They were given to the first elder for a reason. And the reason was to help people find a way to have a good life while they travel this walk. So that's the seven gifts, and I'm on to the prophecies. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to recite the prophecies. That is a creation story, but I'd like to relate to a couple of points in the prophecies. And you can look the prophecies up on the internet. They're all over the place. People have published them. Mm-hmm. And they're pretty accurate, and they're not unique. There are directions in every belief system in the world, and every one of them tell the same thing. They just have a little different way of saying it, depending on where you come from. Mm-hmm. But in the seven prophecies, there were seven prophets that spoke. The first three spoke of what would happen to the native people and what they needed to do. The fourth spoke of the interaction between the native people and others that would come to their land, the so-called light-skinned race. And in that, they were two spirits that spoke as a prophet. The first said that when the people come, if they offer their hand and they have no weapon in their other hand, they will have come in peace. And you should accept them and share with them, and the sharing would create two nations that would become one great nation. And you would benefit from each other's knowledge. What a beautiful thought. Mm-hmm. The second of that fourth fire, or fourth spirit, fourth prophet, said, beware. Because if the light-skinned race comes with their hand offering in peace, but they hold a weapon in their hand, there will be much harm, much disaster for the people. Okay? Mm-hmm. So now you got two clashes. Well, I always figured, well, yeah, we the people from Europe sure did come with our hand with a weapon, and we were very detrimental. But the fact is, the first people that came to the Ojibwe were French courtiers, and they came with an open hand. They wanted to trade. They wanted to hunt. They shared what they understood with the people. They even joined and intermarried with them. And there are people in Canada and around the world that are part of the Métis, which is a group of people that married into Native Americans. Now, that happened. Then you go to the seventh prophecy. The seventh prophecy says the people that migrated will come back to the East and share their teachings with all the people in the East. That's what Larry was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And many others are doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
It's going on right now.
Yeah.
And that in sharing their teachings, they would share their teachings with a new people, all of the people in the place they come back to in the East, not just native, but all people. And that's what Larry was doing, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the beauty of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the ending of that seventh prophecy is that we will go into another time, and how we go into that time will determine what is in the future. If we go in a good way, there'll be a pleasant green road for out forever. And you see that in a lot of different prophecies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nostradamus says 1,000 years of peace. But then the other option is that we'll go down a road of red hot coals, and the people will be destroyed. There's two decisions, and you look around today and you say, oh my God. Reality is we're headed for that coal road, but we're not in the eighth fire. We're in the seventh.
Mm-hmm.
And the seventh will determine the next direction. Mm. My hope is the work that Larry did, the work that other elders are doing, the work that other people in other belief systems around the world are doing will help to bring us to a point where we realize that we don't have to hurt one another. We can learn to love one another and help each other. Mm-hmm. We can become one. Mm-hmm. And that is the hope. And you talked to me a little bit about happiness, Deb. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I find I can't be happy all the time. I don't think anybody can. But I can feel good most of the time. I feel good because I'm centered. I feel good because I live by values, those 7 gifts. Mm-hmm. I feel good because I believe that what the prophecies are saying is there's still hope. Mm-hmm. And it's up to you and me. Mm-hmm. We together are all one with Creator. And those are the things I've learned. That they're sharing it with me, they're sharing it with other people. Mm-hmm. The Native people are. They're coming to a place where they're saying it's time to put down the resentments of what's happened so that we are able to move forward. If you have resentment, you can't move forward. You're stuck. Mm-hmm. It's like being in a mud puddle.
Yeah, we might run out of time here. You did really well in sharing and filling this time with good words, and we are really grateful for that. Noodin, thank you so much for joining us, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's truly been an honor to talk to you. I always enjoy, and I hope we can have you back soon to continue this conversation and maybe have a few more questions for you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Noodin.
Thank you, Deb. It was wonderful to be with you.
All right. You take care now.
You as well.
Okay.
Gigawatt.